I don't think that's right at all. I don't think that an illegal migrant can choose the sentence that that person's going to be sentenced to. That's a matter for the courts. The courts decide how long an offender is sentenced for, not the migrant.
So Robert Jenrick's argument being that if the illegal migrant is given a sentence of less than a year, in fact, we have had a case recently, I think an Iranian asylum seeker who entered the country illegally 3 times, then came back for a 4th time and was given a sentence of less than a year for producing cannabis, for basically building a cannabis factory. And he was therefore able to avoid deportation from the country because his sentence was less than 12 months.
Deportation is automatic if you get more than 12 months and you're a foreign national. There are other circumstances in which people can be excluded from the country. But the point of these sentencing guidelines, which are only draft at the moment, is to ensure that there's the opposite of two-tier justice. At the moment, we have no guidelines for these offences. Some of them are new offences, some of them are new penalties. And the idea is to introduce consistency and avoid people getting an out-of-line sentence if they're sentenced in a part of the country that doesn't have many cases of this sort.
But Joshua, you're not seriously suggesting that the sentencing guidelines that we've been reading about in recent weeks are an attempt to produce a level playing field in our justice system?
That's exactly what I'm suggesting. That's the whole point of the Sentencing Council. It was created in order to ensure that courts across the country are working from the same song sheet, from the same guidelines. That's why they're called guidelines. They don't change the maximum sentence. They don't introduce minimum sentences. They simply ensure that if you are sentenced in one part of the country, the sentencer, a judge or magistrate, has the same guidelines in front of him or her as the sentencer in another part of the country.
But Joshua, why should we be taking into account whether somebody belongs to an ethnic minority or they're transgender before they're sentenced?
I think you're confusing 2 sets of guidelines. You're talking about the guidelines which the Sentencing Council has been asked to consider reconsidered by the Lord Chancellor Shabana Mahmood. What this story in the paper today that you're asking me about is not those guidelines at all.
Sure.
These are new draft guidelines which actually say that the courts should be aware of the sensitivities and ensuring that people are not sentenced because they come from a minority of one sort or another. And these are only draft guidelines. They're entirely separate. They haven't been approved. They were put out for consultation last year, and the consultation period ended last June before the election.
Do you think, and I wasn't confusing the two, I was just suggesting that over the last couple of weeks we've had a number of cases about different sentencing guidelines, which I think many people out there will be reading and thinking, is this really a level playing field within the judicial system? Let me just lastly ask you this. Do you think in this country the legal system, the justice system, is actually doing a good job at inspiring, cultivating public trust in the system?
No, I don't. I think it's been underfunded for many years. I think people are upset at the fact that people don't serve the full prison sentences that they receive, that they have to be let out early because the prisons are full to overflowing. There are delays in the courts, which is something the present government is trying to tackle. It's far from perfect, but I don't think there's any reason to say that just because it's proposed to ensure consistency across the country, that's two-tier justice. It's the opposite of two-tier justice. It's an attempt to ensure that everybody is sentenced in the same way.
Well, thank you, Joshua Rozenburg, for joining us this evening with some really insightful comments. Thank you.